you touched upon where Victoria is right now. Victoria's has an Indigenous voice, like, and a really clear assembly, a treaty process, and yet, as an outsider, I have seen the process that the Uluru Statement from the Heart has gone through in Australia, and I'm still stunned that the situation in Victoria is still the exception rather than the norm. And this is a very big question to ask. Either thinking about why is it that the exception is the norm, or what is it that made that possible in Victoria to get into that treaty relationship, and that actually having a clear Indigenous voice is a positive thing, and governance is a positive thing rather than something that scares the government.
Yeah, so I think there is a number of reasons, and so if we focus on how did we get to here in Victoria, that's part of a key, I think, of why other jurisdictions have taken so long, is that one of the things which really, as I said, that conceptual shifting of where Aboriginal people are and what our issues are and how we progress as a people. So shifting, taking the focus off the disadvantage or severe disadvantage only and looking at the whole community. That was actually a real shift. And look, a lot of it came from within the Aboriginal community itself. And I remember myself did this a couple of times. Bear in mind, I was the head of Aboriginal Affairs for the state government, right? And I used to say publicly, don't expect too much from government. We're not that great. And when people would say, what is the government's real agenda? No, you're looking at it. That's it. That's all there is. And it actually, people started to think about, instead of waiting for government to set the agenda for us and then us responding as Aboriginal people, we should be setting the agenda, and not just on the problems that are defined by data, but where do we want to be? What do we want the world to look like for our children? What are the things that we want for not only our generations, but the generations that come after? So there was this, I guess, general shift from within the Aboriginal community and from a number of Aboriginal people, senior public servants in the broader Aboriginal space, who started the discussion of what is the role of government in the lives of Aboriginal people. Is it for government to provide the solutions, or is it government to say, where do you want to go and how can we help you? What is our role in that? Or more importantly, what is not our role in that? An example of that is when the Native Title Act didn't work. It doesn't work in Victoria. It doesn't work in urbanised Australia. It was made for northern and remote Australia. So in Victoria, we came up with our own act, the Victorian Traditional Owner Settlement Act, and it works for us. That was driven, it commenced with a drive from within a few Aboriginal public servants putting their heads together to say, this is simply not acceptable, that the Native Title Act delivered nothing to us in Victoria. And then having conversations with some critical leaders in the traditional owner community in Victoria, worked it through. We now have the Victorian Traditional Owner Settlement Act. So that leads to this situation where people start to think beyond the present and to the future. Where do we want to get? And obviously, when we started to do all this and have a framework for government, we've looked at whole of life, you find you are actually dealing with all the things. You are dealing with the justice system, imperfect as we are in dealing with it. I think Victoria is way ahead of every other jurisdiction. We're dealing with health. We're dealing with education. We are dealing with Aboriginal economic participation, not Aboriginal employment. It's easy. Employment, as most people envisage it, is easy. Unemployed to employed. That's easy. And if you just look at that, it's comfortable, it's easy, it's lazy. The real trick is, how do you have people have a lifetime of economic participation that leads to increasing wealth, community and individual wealth. That's the hard part. But we're on the way with all those things, which left the elephant in the room that we never thought we'd even look at, let alone speak its name, treaty. And that started a movement. Once we kind of dealt with a few things, attention turned to what's left, the big elephant in the room, treaty. And that's how Victoria got to where it is now. I think for other jurisdictions, it's not so much people are frightened to speak its name, but they don't know how to speak its name or speak about it or conceptually get their heads around it. when there is so much else going on. Having said that, because of Victoria's move, we've found that the Territory's in the throes of having the discussion. Queensland is, I believe Tasmania's already started it. So in one sense, it's good that we establish the beachhead for other jurisdictions as well. So that's how we got around to it. It was driven by a few Aboriginal people with a deep commitment to say, we are not going to leave for our children a world that hasn't changed from the one we inherited from the generations before us.